This video explores using Google Scholar for dissertations. Most importantly, when you start your literature search for a dissertation project, you have to be organized. You have to be systematic. I will do some additional videos on systematic reviews where I go further into search strategies and issues that you might face. Personally, I like to use Excel to organize myself and to record my literature search. I start with identifying search terms. So for instance, if you're interested in corporate cash holdings, you might start noting a few search terms that you use in Google Scholar, like cash holdings, corporate cash holdings, and so on. Then I would start with the top academic journals in your field. So when we talk about finance, it's a Journal of Finance, Journal of Financial Economics, and Review of Financial Studies. And I focus on the last maybe 5 to 10 years. So this will narrow down your search because you want to focus on the key papers first and you want to look at the most recent evidence. I mean, of course, then once you covered all of these, you then will extend your search and might go into other journals or other time periods. Now let's head over to Google Scholar and give it a little spin. So here we are in Google Scholar. Of course, you can just use here the search and just type in cash holdings. Here we go. So that will do. But of course, now you don't restrict yourself to particular journals or a particular time period. So that might be acceptable for a first look at the literature. Now, when you click on this icon here, you can modify your search. You go to advanced search, and in here you can specify more precisely what you're looking for. So for instance, let's look for cash holdings. We can look anywhere in the article, but of course that is a bit broad. It might be useful to restrict it to the title of the article. So this ensures that the paper is really predominantly about cash holdings and not related issues, because, well, you quite often include cash holdings as a control variable, but it might not be the main topic of the paper. Then we could restrict the journals. For instance, here, Review of Financial Studies, and we can also restrict the date, say the last maybe 10 years or so. And as you can see, now we are down to 8 results. So this is quite, realistic. Already you see right from the start, there are a few heavily cited papers that are definitely important. And if you work on corporate cash holdings, you will certainly recognize these names. So then the starting point would be to look at all of these papers, and there are too many in this particular case. Even if it's 100 or so, you can still manage, and just focus on the abstracts first. So review the abstracts and select the papers. So here you basically decide whether this is a paper that is potentially relevant or not. Look at the subtopics. Yeah, so in this particular case, corporate cash holdings, there is certainly a subtopic about corporate governance. Then there's an area of research on mergers and acquisitions and excess cash holding, and so on. So you will identify certain subtopics, and this might also help you to review your own research questions. So very frequently at this stage, you might refine your question. You might restrict yourself to one of these sub-themes. It's very important that you keep notes. You have to do proper record keeping, otherwise you will forget. In particular, if you work on a longer project, such as a PhD project, this is even more crucial. Or when you do your own research. Quite often I work on a problem for maybe 10 years, and very frequently these projects might not be successful, but still I might use some of the insights in other projects. But in order to do this, I have to keep records. So how to do this effectively? So of course you can simply put it down on paper, and then it looks a bit like this, highly messy, highly disorganized. I don't recommend that. In particular, this doesn't age very well. So nowadays, everything I do is kept in an electronic format. So if I scribble stuff on paper, I take a picture or I scan it and keep it as a PDF document. Now this gives you many options. You can even do some, PDF processing if you know how to do this, but at least you can store it somewhere, and even after years you can revisit your notes and you might be surprised on what you find. If you focus on a dissertation project, which is a far shorter time scale, I think you can take notes in Excel or Word, whatever you prefer. And in particular for empirical work, I think it's very powerful if you summarize the key insights of each and every paper and organize all of it into one table. For instance, you could mention the country covered, the time period covered, the dependent variable, so how is, in this case, corporate cash holding measured. So very often you have a reference to total assets, sometimes you take a log, sometimes not, sometimes you take a first difference, and so on. What are the independent variables? And then, of course, what are the key findings? And what is the method used? And you can put it all together into one table. So you might have a table with maybe 20 papers, and you can immediately see what they have done in these papers. And that also helps you to plan your own data collection. And I will talk about data collection in a future recording. Next, you should early on organize your references. So when I started doing research, I was far less organized, and I did it at the end. So I just did all the reading, took all the notes, and then at the end I tried to manage references. This is not very effective. So when I do research nowadays, I have to be much more efficient because there are so many time constraints. So I use LaTeX. Very rarely I use these days Word, and I try to organize my references right from the start. I show you now how to do this in Google Scholar. I will use LaTeX. Of course, you can use Word. Personally, in particular, if you're into mathematics, LaTeX is definitely worth exploring, and I will do a few more videos on LaTeX. Just leave a comment below if you find this exciting. Well, hopefully you do. So here in the settings, you can modify your reference manager. So in my case, I want to see BibTeX, but I can also have EndNote. So whatever you use, you should be able to download references. I just save that and go back to my search. So now you should see here a link to the BibTeX. I just click on this and here it goes. So now what I do is I just simply copy paste that. So I open my BibTeX and just copy paste that in. I save it. So that's my BibTeX file. It's just a plain file and it has a certain structure in place. So you might have here different articles. This is for us common. You might have a book, for instance, and it has a certain structure. You have certain fields which you fill, like title, author, and so on, and it maintains a structure. It's a structure like a dictionary, basically. Good, so what you now need is you need the name. So that's the first entry. So that is the way to identify it. You just copy this. And then you open your LaTeX file. So that's my example file. Now this is really a bare minimum file. So I just start on the first line with document style. I specify article. Then I say begin document. I change the reference style to plain. You can have lots of different options. Then I start a section, an introduction. I have here a citation, but this is empty at the moment. And then I have my references added. And references simply refers to my BibTeX file. So that's the name of the file. I don't have to put the extension here. So if I now put in the name, and here it is, it now appears in my references. I see you in the next one.